this is Nora LaTorre with Nourished with Nora. I'm so happy because today I have here with me as our guest, Dr. Ashley Gearhardt. Dr. Ashley Gearhardt is a professor of clinical psychology at University of Michigan. She's a top researcher. She's been identified as top 2% scientist in the world. She's done over 190 peer-reviewed papers. She actually created the Yale Addiction Food Scale. And she is an incredible thought leader about the connection between ultra-processed food and addiction. I recently had the honor of testifying with her to support a bill, AB 1264, that protects kids from the most harmful ultra-processed foods. And she is a true change maker and truth teller. And I'm so excited to be in conversation and learn from you. So thank you for being here.
Oh, thank you for having me. I felt like when we met, it was so exciting to see somebody who's really making the change that we see needs to happen. And so I'm thrilled to talk with you today.
I feel like we're all making it happen together, and it's so fun, and it's fun to make change because we can see
Mhm.
it. And then I think also it's going to take so many of us working on it from so many different
Absolutely.
angles. So I just want to dive in right away.
Sure,
So
let's do it.
my first question for you is: are ultra processed foods and sugar the new tobacco?
I would say yes. My research finds that, particularly those ultra processed foods that are delivering just tons of sugar, especially amplified with fat, and then are further just like the volume is turned up through a bunch of flavor additives, that is really activating people in a way that mimics exactly what happens when people smoke a cigarette. And, if we take a step back, the reward system of the brain has really been designed to make sure that we get enough food. It cares a lot about things like sugar and fat and calories. And that's what cigarettes have been able to kind of trick into caring about. Well, we've changed the food supply to be so much more like a tobacco cigarette than a fruit or vegetable that our brain really doesn't stand a chance against all the food industry's innovations.
I've never just thought about like that packaged shiny product
Yeah.
and as closer to a cigarette. That ultra processed food product is packaged and shiny and addictive, just like a package of cigarettes, and damaging to our health and toxic like a cigarette.
Absolutely.
I
Like,
just never thought I never like put those two images side by side.
it's really, even doing this work, I've been doing this work for, gosh, how many years now? Almost 20 years. And I still feel like I'm learning new things almost every single day. And one of the things that blew my mind that came out a few years ago was how much the tobacco companies bought up and purchased the ultra processed food and beverage companies in the 70s and 80s. They owned them through the 2000s, right when our food supply went off the rails. And they used their marketing and research and development know-how from their tobacco holdings. And there's evidence, documented, published evidence, that they took those same strategies and applied them to their ultra processed foods and beverages. And so when I think about it, like almost on the flip side, like, okay, I'm going to tell you I have a substance and it activates the brain as much as tobacco. It can compete with cocaine and how much animals love it and want to seek it out. And we gave it to RJ Reynolds and Philip Morris, and we let them tinker with it until they could make as much money off it as possible. And now we're letting them sell it to our kids, and it's the majority of our food supply. Like, that is actually what happened. And it actually kind of sounds like a bad sci-fi movie.
Yeah, it
We're
sounds
like,
like a conspiracy
no,
theory.
no one would ever let that happen. And instead we're like, that's absolutely what happened. And they even, the flavor additives that are in cigarettes, I think that's an underestimated part of what makes cigarettes addictive are the flavor enhancers in them. All cigarettes deliver about the same amount of nicotine, about 1 to 1.5% of a cigarette is nicotine. Oh, the rest of it is kind of additives and enhancers, and it has the same flavor enhancers like sugar and cocoa and licorice and these flavor capsules that are then also put into ultra processed foods. And so our brain, that's really wired to care deeply about the connections of certain flavors with rewarding substances, gets really, really attached to those brand specific flavor profiles. That's how they hook you on cigarettes. It's also how they hook you on many ultra processed foods and beverages.
And they're hooking our kids. Let's talk
Oh,
about like the
yeah.
impact of this on kids and young brains that aren't developed, that
Oh,
don't
yeah.
have that as much, governing thought, as much, their amygdalas are more triggered. They don't have that neural sheath, etc. So could you talk about what does it
Totally.
do for little brains?
Oh my gosh, little brains. I mean, this is totally unprecedented. I mean, the tobacco companies did go after kids, some. And the reason they did is because, whatever your first cigarette is and like the sensory memories you have from that cigarette, you get attached to that specific brand of cigarettes and you're more prone to smoke that your whole
Mm.
life. And most kids would start smoking when they were like teenagers.
Hook
So they
brand
would
loyalty early.
advertise, exactly, they were advertised on stuff like the Flintstones. That way kids would start to have these expectations and preferences for certain brands. They try it when they were like 14 or 15 and then be hooked for life. What we're seeing with ultra processed foods and beverages is that on steroids, right? Like by the time a kid is like 2 years old, their diet is majority ultra processed foods. That is the number one thing that's being marketed to them. And the companies, the ultra processed food and beverage companies actually get tax write-offs for advertising to kids. It's like can be a tax write-off
I
for
did
them.
not know that.
So they're actually like they're kind of like getting paid to do this. And then our government is like buying up all these ultra processed foods and beverages and giving them to kids in schools and in vending machines. And so they're creating lifelong brand loyalty, hooking them when their brains are much more plastic and malleable. Their brains are set up to learn
Mm.
and to be responding to their environment so they can optimally thrive. But these companies, whether it's tobacco or certain like really intense like social media or gambling, sports gambling, vaping, they've gotten so good at engineering these products in a way that really activates that kind of like deep lizard part of our brain
Mhm.
that is just so stimulated
Urging.
by those exact urges, desires, like the attention just gets captured and hooked. But kids, the kind of breaks of your brain, the like prefrontal cortex, it doesn't get fully developed until you're in your like mid 20s.
Mhm.
So all you have this reward system that's a little bit, unhinged a bit in kids, and that's when they're going after them and targeting them. And so it's
Picturing
just
like that scene
really
in the Inside Out movie where like, they're just
yeah,
hitting all the buttons of emotion. Like you're just like
exactly.
there's less of that central commander like,
Oh, totally.
regulating your feelings. And then if there are shiny things that then cause addiction, then you don't then kids it's hard for kids to have control.
Absolutely. Like our brains never evolved to be this tempted, right? Like if you think of how humans
Mm.
were, we were living in like food scarcity, like our big stimulation was maybe like a fire and a stick, and
Yeah.
now
Yeah.
they've just,
A
the
sunset.
technology,
It's like
exactly, the technology at the fingertips that
mm,
many of which was honed in the tobacco realm that is being applied in the realm of things that should be nourishing us, food reward, and instead it's hooking us for profit. But then they're also like health washing it, right? They put all these health
yeah.
claims on these products, and then when parents are trying to navigate a grocery store and their kids are tantruming because they want the cereal box with the toy and the like exciting colors, and it says, oh, but it has whole grains. It's hard. I'm a food scientist, and walking around the grocery store I find it hard to navigate all the claims and everything that's out there. It's really about making parents jobs much harder. So there's this small subset of people who get to like buy yachts and have like fancy fancy
Yeah.
vacations while the rest of us have kids who are dysregulated and unhealthy.
Or grabbing things and trying to put it in the cart. You
Totally.
shared something with me that definitely blew my mind and it made me go back to that cereal aisle growing up in Minnesota.
Yeah,
Can you share one of the like really sneaky techniques that's used to
totally.
draw kids into into certain cereals?
Yes. So, one of the things, it was a study that came out a few years ago, and I think this just shows really how intentional this all is that the cartoon characters, I mean, the cartoon characters alone, kids love, cartoon
Yeah.
characters. They're clearly not advertising to like, a 40-year-old woman. They're clearly going after kids, but they take it a step farther. where the eye contact on, those cartoon characters on cereal boxes is looking slightly down. And it's doing that so the little kids who are below the cereal box will look up and catch eyes with the cartoon character. And again, it's our evolutionary wiring, actually. Like, we're evolutionarily wired to be really sensitive to when somebody's looking at us. I mean, that's one of the most important social cues for being able to make friends, or, a potential threat. Somebody's looking at you. So we're hardwired to pay attention when someone's trying to make eye contact with us. And they're using that on the cereal boxes so the kids see it and then pester their parents for it.
I try to avoid the cereal aisle now. I don't think I like it. Just like I just don't
Yeah.
take my kids into the cereal aisle.
Yeah. Yeah.
But now, when I pass through one, I will never walk through a cereal aisle the same way again. Just because it's like now I'm just gonna see all these products looking at me and looking at my kids. Like,
Yeah.
back up, like.
I know it really does. I think one of the things about this that feels deeply frustrating
Right.
is how much the industry is able to hide everything they're doing.
Yeah.
And that's how it was with tobacco. I mean, everyone just kind of thought, oh, it's just like a leaf, it's just a plant, and they just like roll it up. I mean, that's no big deal, right? Like, people really felt really positively about the tobacco industries and smoking. At one point, the majority of American men were smoking. It was just, we would all be walking around in these big clouds of smoke, and people were just kind of, used to that. It was really when we started to see that the industry was really intentionally like creating this ultra processed product where they make this thing called recon tobacco, and they break down the tobacco leaves, and they like strip them out of their matrix, and they put them in these sheets of like tobacco processed, ickiness that has all these different additives that are embedded in them. And that's actually what's going in the cigarette. And they even do things like in the filter, we'll put like little flavor capsules in the filter in cigarettes. So when you pull on it, like the flavor capsule will break and you get this flavor hit.
And that rush.
So they were doing all this stuff, and we now know that from lawsuits and ways that they've had to be honest with the American consumers. And with food and with ultra processed foods and beverages, we know that they're using so many of those same tactics, but it's all hidden behind these vaults of kind of their own privacy, while we're all suffering because we don't know what they've done to our food supply. And I really think it's essential that we start to hold them accountable and make them, be more honest with us about what they're really doing.
Yeah, and the thing is about like food industry accountability, and that's why I was so excited to be supporting that bill, AB 1264, that actually blocks the most harmful ultra processed foods, but it holds vendors accountable. So it says, hey, suppliers, hey, food companies, you can't sell the worst of the worst, and that's why I think it's so critical that we pass this, because it's an food industry accountability bill.
I agree. And I think it's so essential. Like, when I use tobacco so much as like kind of my benchmark and my framework, because it was really controversial, whether it was addictive, it was so widespread that people were kind of numb to the fact that so many people were dying. And when I see now is like that same sort of instinct that we are not carving out, we are still treating these hedonically optimized industry engineered products like they're real food, and
we're being really casual about it. It hasn't clicked in yet. And like
an article just came out this week that the estimate is that an American is dying every 4 minutes from a preventable death due to ultra processed food. One person every 4 minutes.
It's the number one cause of death. It is preventable. We're actually starting to call the diseases ultra processed food related diseases, like diabetes, obesity. Like Dr. Robert Lustig, the chief science officer at Eat Real, where I'm the CEO, he really, I think, coined that term, and as trying to get people to call it what it is, because when you look at just diabetes versus car accidents, or heart disease versus car accidents, but then when you see that these are ultra processed food and preventable and lifestyle diseases, you see that. And I'm gonna create a chart that shows it, like, because you see that, and then that's really powerful what you said about just every 4 minutes an American is dying from a preventable disease. Like, it's
due to ultra processed foods. Absolutely. And so when our government is like then selling that same product in our schools, I think it makes it really confusing to say like, well, if this is like a problem and a real harm to my child, like it, but they're giving it to my kid, right? And so I think really calling this stuff out. I mean, my stepdad went to a school in Southern Ohio where they had a smoking room in high school. So you just like, kids would smoke during the day and they go to the smoking room. And but I think those sorts of
We used to smoke on
setups.
planes. Like,
Yeah, totally, all the time, right? I like worked in a restaurant for so long, and my hair would come home just like reeking of cigarette smoke. And so just this sense that our systems right now are essentially signaling to the consumer, like, oh yeah, this is not a big deal, right? Like the government
this is
wouldn't
how it
be
is. This
forcing
is
our
just how it
children
is.
to these things. It's just, and it really,
Sugar is everywhere. 67% of kids' calories. Like, this is just this is how it is.
and we
This
have no choice. And it's one of the things, Nora, about like coming and meeting you and going to one of your schools was like, my God, yes. Like, I just sometimes I feel there's this sense of hopelessness and just like, well, this is just what it is. And I'm like, this is a new problem. This isn't like, this is like 0.1% of human existence has been dominated by ultra processed foods. And there are countries all over the world, like Italy and like Brazil, that do
and
not, Japan, all these places that do not have the ultra processed food environment that we do. So like why
and they're
in
living
America?
longer and their kids are healthier
Right.
and
That's
their
right.
happiness
They're
indexes are
thriving.
higher.
And like food is in the spot where it's meant to be, which again, I was also really struck by what you're doing, is that like the ability to socialize and connect over a real nourishing meal that satisfies us and to share that from human to human. I think we know in our bones that the modern world, especially in America, is not set up for us to flourish. We know it in our bones. And I think in some ways we haven't been listening to our intuition. And to me, food is such like a harbinger of the fact that we have lost connection with what is makes life meaningful and allows us to thrive. And doing that for our kids and our families and setting up systems that allows that to happen is really powerful. So thank you for that work.
Yes, yes. I was so happy that you came to have
Oh, I was so excited.
lunch.
Such a good
Let's talk about that. We are at Natomas Unified, which is an incredible school district, but that has made a ton of changes to make real food available to their kids and make it so delicious and fun. So talk to me about like what did you think about the school lunch?
gosh. I was just so amazed at how tasty the food was. And I was really amazed at how they would go. I loved the connection with the farmers, like the farmers actually
Mhm.
growing the food, connecting with the school that is prepping it. I loved how they would go and get the kids' feedback and like try things. Like I think people feel like, oh, kids won't eat this. And I think they absolutely will. When we create good, tasty, convenient food in a way that's fun, that's informative. Like I really, when I talk to my kids, we spend a lot of time talking about the exciting things that blueberries do for your body and that like this really healthy food, how it's nourishing you and it's making your brain, we call it, you're making your brain wrinklier because like wrinkly brains are really good for learning and your muscles. And I think those are some ways we can counteract so much of the marketing that's out there that really makes it seem like, oh, eating the candy bar, the chips is the exciting, fun
Right.
thing. When, one thing I've learned recently is this idea of like create that these products are created to have a short hang time. This is also true of cigarettes. So when you eat like ultra processed foods,
Oh.
a lot of them have, when you smoke a cigarette, you smoke it and you're only satisfied for a little bit. Then you need another cigarette. It like causes this big spike
Yeah.
of nicotine. You get stimulated, but then it crashes. And you go through a little withdrawal and you feel irritable and cranky and you crave another cigarette and you're more vulnerable to cigarettes in your environment. Well, ultra processed foods do a really similar thing, and that because they strip out the fiber and the water and the protein, and they really, rapidly condense the rewarding ingredients in these little like pre-digested paste, and then they do all these flavor additives that are really intense into it. You eat it, and you get this like intense gobsmack of sensory pleasure and stimulation, but many of the flavor compounds in there are set up to have this short hang time. So they hit really quickly, but they fade really rapidly.
And then you
And
want the next bite.
exactly, it's why like if you eat a banana, You eat a banana and you're satisfied. You don't want another banana. If you eat a big bowl of strawberries, you eat it and you feel satisfied and you have this long-lasting strawberry flavor. You're not like, oh my God, I need to eat a whole other bushel of strawberries to feel satisfied.
It also
But
takes more time. You're doing more work. You're
you're
chewing. You're
chewing,
getting
your
that
brain
fl
is tracking it as
your
calories.
like your saliva starts, your digestion starts
Exactly.
before it even gets to your stomach through that
Totally.
slower experience. Yeah.
And so those ones, when they take out like the sort of, they're called volatile compounds that are part of the flavor compounds of an actual strawberry, but they strip it out of its actual natural package and they like condense it. So that strawberry taste will like, you're eating this, ultra processed strawberry yogurt, you get like smacked by the strawberry flavor, but then it fades really rapidly. And so you want more and you want more. And so they're engineering moorishness. So you just keep wanting more and you never feel satisfied and your natural stop signals don't get hit in the same way. And so like, that versus really reconnecting
Yeah.
our mouths, our brains, our bodies to what it feels like to eat really tasty, real food is such a gift to give our kids, to give ourselves. Ooh, Nora, can I talk to you about that depression study that
Yeah.
we
Yeah.
had
Yeah.
come
Yeah.
out?
Let's dive into studies.
Oh my gosh. Okay, so
I'm
Nora,
so
like,
glad you got to see Eat Real in action. And,
oh,
we actually
so really
certify the school districts and we help them make the changes. And they're sourcing 90% of their produce in Natomas locally from that's keeping that money into local communities and local family farmers. And so I've been thinking about that lunch so much, and the artichokes and the curried carrots that you and I shared.
the rainbow trees. What was the rainbow called, Nora?
Oh, I think she was just like she wanted the kids to eat the rainbow, and it was
Yes,
giant.
eat the
Yeah,
rainbow, eat the
eat
rainbow.
the rainbow trays, and it had like sunchokes. It was just like, and then the taco bar. I think about that guacamole nonstop. I'm like,
Oh my
I
gosh, it's
want to order
delicious.
that like right now. It was so good. So I'm
It's
so
like
glad you got to
inch-free
see what's
here,
possible
and
and
I'm
that
like
that's happening.
salivating.
And it's about to happen in with more people getting involved with Eat Real, like in and people like you that are championing it, and then people like Assemblymember Gabriel who are writing policy to like
Yes.
make this take our standards and make them state and national standard. It's going to happen quickly, but we're on track to reach 20 states and 1 million
Love
kids.
it.
Like that school lunch that we had is was a dream 5 years ago, but now it's happening and it's about to happen this year
I
with
love
more
it.
philanthropists and more donors getting involved and more grants. And like we're gonna take it, and like I'm excited to have school lunch with you around the country and see
Oh,
and
I'm
help
so
more
excited.
kids
I'm
have
so
that
excited you're
experience.
coming to Michigan.
Yes.
And I said, like, I feel like there's even so many additional places where just being in that space with you and having that meal and also seeing the people who are making the food and how much pleasure and joy and connection they felt. Um, it
Pride.
was so
We're so
powerful.
proud. They're like and
And
they call them their kids. Like these are our kids.
exactly. And I even think of that, like there's so many reports coming out right now about how this current generation of kids are the least flourishing in recent memory and that families are super stressed and we're, but busy parents. My husband and I both work full time. We have
Yeah.
4 and a 6-year-old. It's wild. And like the screens kind of fill in for the fact that we don't have community in the way that we used to.
Mhm.
I think about like these schools having that amazing food. Like I dream of like a school's supper lunch club where
Yes.
I go pick my kids up and I have meals that like are at the made at the school where I like join this like meal service and I can sit there with other families that have kids of multiple ages and we all eat together without screens and the kids run around and it's another revenue stream for
Yes.
our schools to help them thrive while making community and our health and our mental well-being a priority. I mean, I just think there's so many
I
ways to
love it.
go.
I
And I
love
feel
it.
like
I would
these
definitely go to
systems down.
that
Oh yeah,
community meal
1,000%.
100%. I love that idea. We'll have one of our schools did have a school night supper club. Natoma is actually
Love
where we
it.
were. And it's like also showing people how cool school food can be and like
Oh,
it could save parents money and time and da da da. So yeah. Okay. Well, let's nerd out on the research.
yeah.
What are you nerding
Oh,
on? What's cutting edge research? Spill the tea.
yes. So I'm so excited. So one thing that we have just been finishing analyzing that I'm really excited about is, and it's where you come in many ways, Nora, is like I feel like my focus has been so much on like the problem, the problem, the
Mhm.
problem. Like these foods are not real foods. They are designed like cigarettes for these small, these mega companies, but a small group of them to profit. And people are getting hooked on them and so they can't stop even when they want to and they know it's bad for them. I feel like I've been like the harbinger of doom so much. And
Which
and
we need we
which
don't
we
fully
need more.
realize it yet. So I think
But
I just think
it's
your work is so crucial. Like we don't realize that, like, how pervasive it is, how it's, type 2 diabetes up in our kids, cancer, obesity, like it's,
Alcoholic fatty liver disease in kids, these diseases we never saw in children before the time period that tobacco got involved in food. Like, I mean, it all, like eating
behavioral
disorders,
issues,
binge
tummy
eating
aches, like
disorders,
eczema, like it's,
totally, all these others. So totally, totally wild, just totally incredible. And I've been wanting to move as well in that space of, you know, modern life is stressful and it's hard. We look at people and we say, eat healthier, but then the systems aren't set up to actually help them do that. And so I've been trying to think about how do we make it convenient and accessible and affordable, and where are places that insurers, or it can maybe work with different industry partners. And so we did a study where we took adults who had moderate to severe depression, and we gave them, recommendations to take a break from ultra processed foods, to eat real food that would nourish them. We then gave half of them, we gave everybody that nutrition information. Half of them, we gave like a little snack hamper of like minimally processed snacks. Another group, we gave breakfast, lunch, and dinner for 2 weeks. And then we checked in with these groups in 2 weeks. And what we found is that people, focusing on eating real food and us giving them tools to make that actually convenient and accessible and affordable in their lives, that in 2 weeks doing no other intervention, their depression levels dropped to mild. And like we saw improvements in eating disorder symptoms, we see reductions in cravings. I mean, we see just these massive changes with eating real food. And I just think about that in that context of the mental health crisis that is hitting our kids, and how 1 out of every 5 teenagers in America has seriously considered suicide in the last year. Like, that is devastating. And I think one of the multiple levers that we can pull is, our bodies and brains are connected. These things, they're not separate, is to actually make sure that the body is nourished and well cared for, and not just wagging our fingers at people, but really investing in systems that make it convenient and accessible and affordable for people. Because we all feel time poor and we all feel stressed. And so how do we really fit this into modern life, rather than just shaming people, but they don't live in an environment where that's affordable or accessible, or something they can actually do in their real lives. So I really
a little bit of support, information, access there.
Yeah.
It's really, I feel like, also a beautiful story, the power of the human body and mind, and the power of real food, of like in 2 weeks, you're saying that in this study, they went from severe depression, right? They went from severe depression, 2 weeks of real food and less ultra processed food, and they went to mild depression.
In 2 weeks. And so and that is without, we can combine that with our traditional therapies. We can give them, here, eat this food. And while you're feeling more nourished, let's give you, here's a way to regulate your emotions. Here's some mindfulness. Here's some strategies. Here's some tools. Here's some social
nature
connection.
walk, therapist.
Nature, physical activity, all of these things together. And so I think we can really do this. And so that makes me really excited. And where are these solutions? How do we figure out who are all the solution leaders? How do we make them really apparent? How do we tell our policymakers, maybe get rid of those tax cuts for food companies to be advertising junk food to your kids, and take that money and put it towards making these sorts of, convenient, real food options accessible for people and for families. So I think we can do
structurally set up like this. And to your point earlier, it's recent. It's like it's a failed experiment, and it's a recent problem. And we can fix it quickly. Not only can we fix the problem and stop the subsidies and change policies, which we've been seeing, we can change when Americans come together. We can change policy quickly, cross the aisle. It's this moment of hope for me on that. And then when we make the changes, human bodies respond quickly. We can stop these diseases that are starting in our kids, so that they don't get these diseases in their childhoods and then into adulthood.
Totally. Nora, one of the things, and it's interesting, where the magnitude that people's depression shifted was correlated with the magnitude in which their diet improved. So it really was it wasn't just they're talking to us more. It was really the more their diet became improved, the more their depression changed. And that the
more their diet improved, the more their depression, their mental health improved.
Exactly. That's exactly right. And so this idea of, that we can do this and we have to do this. And we can't afford, I mean, over 3 million children have non-alcoholic fatty liver disease, like the liver of like an elderly alcoholic. Like, what are we doing? Like, we cannot be numb to this. So it's really exciting to think about these solutions and these next steps. And I think, I'm really excited to see work that's coming out on academic performance as well, mental health,
Yeah.
academic performance, all of those sorts of things. And just, that sense of meaning and connection and community that food can really bring us all. So I'm really excited
Part of the
about
day is like, breaking bread together and like, and
that.
just like enjoying the deliciousness of food that, and like, it's what life is like about.
Yeah.
It's,
And I think
and
we're
it,
also busy and hooked on, like all of these like little hits of addictive reward that like these
yeah.
small groups are making so much money out of, I think, almost numbing us to the fact that we are not nourished, not just with our eating, but our social, our connection to
Mm.
nature, moving our bodies. Like there's people who profit off of this, but I think we're seeing how unwell we all are. Like if we were like explorers and we landed on like some planet and everyone was just consuming these like flavored paste with no nourishment and just like staring at these screens while not interfacing each other, we would be like, oh, I do not want to move here, right? We would be if all of a sudden,
Like ultra processed food zombies, I'm out. I'm gone. Like, yeah.
nobody's like, that's the future I want for myself. And yeah, it's happened like so gradually. Same thing happened with cigarettes, that we kind of get numb to the fact that like this is not how we're meant to be. So I feel
And it's
really
and it's not what's
optimistic
worked for
about it.
humans for centuries and
There's
thousands of
such a
years we've been.
mismatch. And like I get really excited about the idea, being an addiction researcher by training, of all these places where we've made movements in the addiction world that's really been powerful. So like public awareness campaigns that have really
Yeah.
showed this is what the industry is doing to hook you, and giving people the right to that knowledge so they can equip themselves, is really key. So I'm hoping we start to do more and more of these sorts of things where we're really giving the consumer the information they deserve. I just
And giving the
learned,
kids the information too. Like
totally. I think
when we
kids
were
are
working at Plastic
actually, yeah, they'll
Food
get
Diet Bill, for
motivated.
just
It's like,
one example. Oh, go ahead.
oh no, I totally with you. Especially our teenagers are like, oh no, no, you are not taking advantage of me. You are not
Right.
tricking me. And that becomes like they're the change makers in so many
Right. They want to take their
ways.
power back in it. And I saw it with my 6-year-old. I said, I explained to Izzy, my daughter, that we worked on this food dye bill, the first food dye bill in California, and
Yeah.
some member gave a lead on that one as well. And then we worked on it in West Virginia, and now it's passing more and more nationally, and the FDA is looking at it. And so I was just kind of explaining to her about food dyes and how it
Yeah.
can, make her not feel well and change her behavior. And she now in the grocery store aisle will look
Yeah.
and she
Oh,
will and
wow.
she'll
That's
offer to
amazing.
swap me things, or she'll say, Mom, this
Oh,
I don't want to have this. Can I have an apple or a banana or something else instead?
that's
Or like, or
awesome.
something like maybe still it's in a package, but it's like less, like, so
Okay.
she's 6 and she has that knowledge and
Yeah,
she can choose better for herself.
I love that.
And I was like, go Izzy, like this is awesome.
And then like, yeah, those kids can really shape it. Like, so school lunches, I think, can have this cascade effect through the whole families, to say, oh wow, like I remember coming home after like tobacco education and like talking to my parents about it. Oh, like this stuff is bad and can hook you. And I think that our children can
Yeah.
really be our messengers. And I dream of things like, now we have dry January, which is like this
Mhm.
really good opportunity for people to
Yeah.
take this reset. There's evidence that it helps people really, change their relationship with alcohol and can have these long-term benefits. I'm really curious, like, wouldn't it be amazing if we had that equivalent of like, no UPF, February or
Real
something
food,
like that?
real food
Where,
reset February. I love it. I mean, and
yeah,
we've done a no editor free sugar challenge
yeah,
with Dr. Mark Hyman and Dr. Lustig,
yeah,
and that was life changing for my personal family, and we did it
yes,
for a month, just removing the added and free sugar.
yeah,
And then, but I love the idea of a real food
yeah. It's
challenge.
like an
Like,
like our research showing that at 2 weeks, people are like, this is hard to do, and if we
yeah, okay, let's
kind of
design one.
constantly
Let's
hooking,
do it.
right?
Okay,
And
2026, we're gonna have a real food
I love it.
2 week sprint
Yeah.
or something.
Yeah. It's something like a reset. Reset your relationship. let's
A real
try
food
and like,
reset.
here's
We're
all
doing
these
it.
resources for
Okay.
prices. Ask your employer to like, like do a program where they like subsidize a meal delivery of real food. Like all these ways that we can help people. Just like ask, how do you feel? Try it yourself. Do an experiment yourself and see, how do
Oh.
you feel?
We could have
And
people like do a pre and
uh,
post, kind of like how
exactly. We
this.
could collect data on this. And we are doing that in our lab right now, a little bit. And like for people who report, really feeling hooked, like fully addicted, showing
Yeah.
all the signs of addiction. And the thing I will prepare people for is that first week, especially if you are kind of hooked and addicted, the
Yeah.
first week can be like going through withdrawal. Like we see that, like when people stop smoking and they feel irritable
Yeah.
and kind of agitated in the cravings. So like you need that support. You need to know you're not alone. You need to think about how are you going to take care of yourselves and give yourself a little grace during that first week. But then again, like by the second week, we are seeing people just like really after it really peaks the like withdrawal sort of symptoms in the first few days. And if you can keep sticking with it, you're gonna start to be like, oh, the ultra processed food noise is going down. Oh, I am not having these energy spikes and crashes all day. Oh, I feel a little bit more like emotionally like stable. Like it really is striking that you can feel markedly better.
So quickly. So okay, we'll design this I think for next year.
Okay,
But for
I love it.
people that are listening right
Yeah.
now, if they wanted to start a 2-week
Mhm.
real food reset,
Yeah.
like what guidance do you have? It sounds like do it with a buddy
Yes,
system.
I do. I think
What
social
else?
doing it on our own, isolation. And I think where I've seen, like, I'm also have done research on eating disorders and treating eating disorders. And I think the thing to focus on is like, don't obsess about the scale. Don't obsess
Yeah.
about it is about your well-being. It's about
Mhm.
nourishing yourself.
I
And
love
so
it.
don't focus on like you don't focus on calorie counting or like trying focus on the quality of the food that you're eating. The closer it is to mother nature, the best. And even like, it may not be for you that like, oh, it has to be like a full 100%. What I see is a lot of people have these risk periods for them, like 3 o'clock in the afternoon
Oh,
or
that's mine.
eight
That's my
o'clock on the
slump.
couch.
That's for sure mine. It's
For
like,
sure.
is there chocolate? Is there chocolate?
a
It's like at
hundred
3 o'clock. I'm
percent.
like,
On the couch at bed watching Love is Blind on Netflix, and or the advertisements. I watch a lot of sports. I'm a big sports fan,
oh,
and
cool.
like it's the only time I feel like I watch real TV, and I'm just like, oh my god, it's like a food advertisement
Yeah.
every few seconds. And even though I know all this stuff, I can feel my mouth salivating when I see it's just food porn, right? They like do these
Right.
big close-ups. We're wired to have that reaction. And then all of a sudden you want to go into the kitchen or like get up the meal app. We're wired
Yeah.
to do that. But if there's spots where like maybe you just want to say 3 p.m. and 8 p.m., I'm going to eat a real food, or I'm going to do a totally different reinforcer for myself. Maybe I'm going to go on a walk with a friend, or I'm going to do something to take care of myself. Like often it is
Mm.
our body telling us that we need a little bit of care, but rather than doing something that really is meaningful and
Like
sustainable
totally
and
habit
nourishing.
swap. It sounds like
Exactly.
instead of going for that chocolate or the
Yeah.
snack or when I like a little bit of
Yeah.
chocolate
Oh
fine, I
yeah. And
think,
it's
but like
fine.
instead of like that indulgent
Yeah.
whatever and not even indulgent, I think it's fine, but like instead of an ultra
Yeah.
processed package
Yeah.
something, do something totally different. Like get that sunshine.
Yeah.
Go like call your
Yeah.
mom. Like it's like
Exactly. Read a trashy book. Like and
yeah.
like so having those things almost like this like little convenience package, like
Mm,
where the UPS really have us is their convenience. Like that's where they're really I'm finding that to be the hardest thing to tackle in my lab because real foods and real rewards that nourish us, they take a little time
yeah.
often. Not always. I've got like a little mandarin orange in my bag and I've got like these delicious like nuts that are in my bag. Like not always, but
Yeah.
we're also time poor. And so the convenience of that reward when we have that moment where we're feeling maybe a little down or a little bored or a little deprived or we need
Yeah.
a little break, those are always oh my god, Nora, I just read the book Sweet and Deadly,
Oh,
which
I haven't
came
read it yet.
out. Oh, it's so good. The author's last name is Carpenter, and
Okay.
it is blowing my ever loving mind. And one
Okay.
of the quotes, I might not get it exactly perfect, but it's a Coca-Cola executive. And they're saying, our goal is to always have our product within the arm's reach of desire. And that's what it is, right? They're creating the desire, they're maximizing the craveability, the desirability of their
And
products.
they talk a lot about permissibility, like where it's permissible for me.
Ooh,
Like, oh, well, this is okay. That's like a huge word that they use.
that's exactly right. And like that is something that happened with tobacco too, is that when all the ultra processing, wasn't just the product. Like people used tobacco for thousands of years actually, but it was in the late 1800s and early 1900s when the technology advanced and they could ultra process the cigarettes and machine mass produce them, futz with the additives. They developed packaging so it could sit on a gas station shelf for multiple months and be in vending machines. Like that's when smoking went up 1,000% and everybody started dying, right? Same thing. You can make a homemade cookie at home, right?
Right.
But you weren't getting these ultra processed versions, which are further amped up with all these additives and preservatives. One additive
Also,
I
that come with a
just
side of BPA with the packaging usually. I'm like,
totally
I keep thinking about that. I'm like, oh, I'm
so
getting a side of
gross. Yes,
microplastics. Like, great.
everywhere. And one of the additives I just learned about, which kind of blew my mind, are these enzymatic additives.
Mm.
And they're enzymes that essentially mimic the effects of your saliva in your mouth. And they are put into the food before you eat them, these like enzymes so essentially they are pre-salivated, pre-digested for you and all these little packages. And then you put them in your mouth, which is part of the reason they just melt so rapidly. It's because
Yeah.
they pre-digested, pre-mashed up, pre-salivated. And so it really rapidly hits your body. And it is just wild to think about, your grandma making you some cookies. She's not going to put a big spit into this like cookie
Potions
to
in
carve
there.
it
Yeah.
down. But that is what's happening on this industrial level. And then it's everywhere. And so every context becomes a go signal. Every context, rather than it used to be, you would have cake at a birthday party and a
Right.
special occasion surrounded by people you loved, and somebody made a cake and spent time on it.
Right.
And so there was this context that was like, we eat cake here.
Right.
Well, with the ultra processing, they're now able to make all these little cakes
Right.
and put some sort of health washing, like, oh, it's got vitamin C or it's a high protein cake, I don't know, and then put it on like every shelf, all these places in your car at the gas station. So every context becomes a go signal for cake. And that makes our brain so much less protected. Like,
This is so personal for me because
crazy.
I feel like I grew up every meal. I'd be like, oh, time for a treat. I was like, I just had like I felt like I was just like,
Pavlovian,
at
like
this
you're like the
study, like, treat,
dog with the
treat,
bell.
treat, like, and you have to break it. And I've had to break it. And like, that's why, like, when I joined Real, I was like learning about American Health Collapse and how sick our kids were getting. And then I was confronting that even though I was an athlete, I didn't really know how to fuel myself. And I had been conditioned to like, I'd spent so much of my mental and like energy on, yeah, treat, cake, cake, treat,
Totally.
so, and like,
Oh,
and like,
yeah.
even, I did the Mark Hyman, I love Dr. Mark Hyman. I did his 10-day reset, in between babies, I think it was
Yeah.
and generally, I try, I get to eat a lot of real food, thankfully, but I, I did that reset early on, and it was wild for me because oh, meal treat, meal treat, meal treat. It was like have
Yeah.
one good treat a week, or after 10
Yeah.
days have a treat. Like then when you're like, well, I'm gonna have one good treat a week, or I'm gonna have one celebration food, or I'm gonna save that cake
Yeah.
for that birthday moment, for that special moment. It's gonna be really something special and not sugar
Yeah.
hidden in everything, and then also treats, and then da da da. Like I just realized like how much I was getting
Oh, yeah.
way more than 25 grams of added sugar a day. I was like,
Oh, yeah.
so
And Nora, like you're talking about something that is like so deeply real. So like one thing I want to make sure I say today is that like one of my messages about this is like a deep self-compassion
mhm.
because our brains were never wired to deal with this level of advancement and how these products are engineered and designed. Like it is truly using every part of our system that evolved to make sure we were going to survive and thrive and have enough calories to have our babies and to like have the energy to do the things we needed to do. The food industry is pulling every single lever to futz with those to hook you on their products, from colors, from having different varieties. I mean, it is unbelievable
Six
to me.
options that seem like, oh, I get
Exactly.
select one of
You know,
six. It's like such a wait, I win.
Wired to that. We're wired to want foods that are pretty familiar but a little bit novel. That is the evolutionary sweet spot because you don't want to do something, you don't want to eat something that's wildly not what you've ever seen before because that might be poison. But if you see something you've had before, it's kind of similar. It looks like that berry you've had before, but is maybe a little different. That our brain really pays attention to that. Well, the thing is, that's where all the brand extensions are coming from, right? We don't need like 40 different types of potato chip that are slightly different flavors, or Coca-Cola flavored Oreos and Oreo flavored Coca-Colas. They're taking these mashups of things that are familiar, but then making them novel in ways that feel safe to our brain and like, oh, good, there's a new source of nourishment when it's not nourishing you. And so I feel like not beating ourselves up and
Mhm.
just treating ourselves with that kindness and then equipping ourselves with knowledge to protect ourselves is such an essential part of this. I see people pivot into self-hatred or really, being cruel to themselves. And that does not work. It really sets people up to fail. So be mad at who you should be mad at, which is the food industry, doing this stuff and lying to you about how healthy it is. And then I think one of the final things I just want to emphasize is like, people think addiction is all about pleasure. And it's really not. What happens with addiction is that, maybe the first time you had that drink or smoked that cigarette or had that, cake, you got this hit of pleasure, like just, But what we see is that people go from, just a user, casual user to like really addicted. It's that the liking stays the same or even starts to go down. You become tolerant to the reward. You need more booze. You need more frequent cigarettes. You need a larger Coca-Cola. But the craving, the wanting, the desire, the cues when you're tired, certain times of day with certain people, the wanting, the craving gets amplified, even if you're not getting the same pleasure that you used to. And so that sense of like, oh, I want this, I have this connection with, usually I have this little treat at the end of every meal, or like that is what they're working on. And so I really suggest we see that one of the big challenges for people that are really showing this addictive profile to these foods is that they don't expect to feel pleasure from fruits and veggies. And I think there's this mismatch. So really test with yourself. A lot of times we see people and they're expecting to eat the chip and feel this huge bliss that maybe they did when they were like 4 years old. And they don't. They eat it, they have this momentary hit, and then they feel kind of disappointed and they're eating more chips to try and chase that pleasure they thought they were going to get. And they just want more and more and more. And then they feel kind of sick. Whereas when people eat real food, like the ones you serve me in your school, if you're paying attention, you actually will get pleasure, and you're not feeling this out of control craving, preoccupation, like out of control desire. But in the moment, if you're paying attention when you're eating real food, you'll be surprised at how much pleasure you get out of it. And so I think we need to ensure, and I think you do such a good job of this, that this isn't about deprivation. It's not about like, eating food you don't like that is like a drudgery, but about letting food nourish you and give you real sustainable pleasure rather than these like hits of, intense stimulation that crash and just leave you wanting more.
Designed, engineered, manipulated, manufactured.
And then hidden.
Yeah.
Hidden, all the consequences, all the levers they're pulling is hidden out of your sight. It's like Oz, Wizard of Oz. Pay no attention to the man behind the curtain who's like, spending millions of dollars on research and development on these products.
I love your story of nourishing ourselves with real food. And, Nourish with Nora is all about how do
Yeah,
we nourish ourselves with real food, with ideas, with
yeah,
passion, and just how do we really create a vibrant life. And I
yeah,
love, especially the study that you shared about how in 2 weeks with real food, you can, you know, have more improved mental health and more vibrancy, and we can
yeah.
nourish our mental health. And you just shared so many examples. I feel like we could, I can't wait. We have to have another conversation. But
Yeah, we totally
I
will.
already want you to come back for
I
part
would
two because
love
I have
that.
way more questions. I have like
Yeah, I knew
a
we would
lot.
get together. We'd
So
start chatting. This is what, like when we first met. It was just
it
like,
was,
oh my, we could just talk all
I
day
just want, I
about
did, I wanted to hang out with you all day, and I got to hang out with you all day. And it was like one of my favorite days. So,
it was
um,
so
I would
wonderful.
love to have another conversation with you
Yeah,
and
it'd
just
be
like
wonderful.
thank you so much for your sweetness, your passion, and how how compassionate you are and how you're really inviting people in such a positive way to fall in love with real food and doing the research and giving them the data and the knowledge so that we can make societal shifts. It's just like I am so inspired by your leadership and thankful for
Oh,
you. And you're one of the angels that I've met this year. And I am feel so lucky to be in conversation with you now, but to get to work with you and get to for our real food reset next year and for part 2 of this conversation. So thank you.
well, I feel the same way, Nora. Thank you for your hard work. You really inspire me, and I'm excited to keep connecting.
Awesome. Thank you.